Hey everybody, welcome back to another YouTube tutorial. My name's Vincent and I'm here, and today we'll be taking a look at macro variation. Um, you might be a bit scared looking at the time of this video. It's quite lengthy, and of course I edited it down a bit, and it's still this long. Well, I can tell you we did quite a lot. The first thing we did is talked about the new macro variation texture, node in Unreal Engine. We also talked about scaling textures that are further away, a bit bigger, so it seems that there's more detail far away. We also talk about darkening and lightening parts of the landscape, because in real world nothing is the same shade of a certain texture. And also the last one we did is we actually added multiple textures. So we added an extra texture for each of our landscape layers, so it blends multiple textures in between. And yeah, that's it for now. So of course, without further ado, let's get into the video. Okay, so last time we left off, we actually made an entire landscape with textures. Everything's set up, but we have hit a bit of a snag. It isn't really obvious if you look at the grass, but if we look at the rocks, you can kind of see a tiling. Now, before we can actually address this problem, which was unavoidable, by the way, why is this so obvious? Well, it's actually pretty simple. Our brains like to see repetition. It's like our brains just want us to notice repetition. But the reason why it's so easy for our brains, to actually get repetition is because, while these are seamless textures, they have a lot of unique detail. And the problem is, it's kind of like you had two cities, for example. One city was a city with multiple grocery stores. Let's say it has a Tesco, 7-Eleven, has multiple grocery stores. But then you get the other city, which only has like 100 7-Elevens. And now suddenly, it's not varied anymore. It's way more jarring to notice that every single texture here is the same. And there's multiple ways to fix it. Of course, I'm going to be talking about the new method for fixing it, which is really insane. So we just want to go ahead and go to our landscape material. What we want to do is we want to take our landscape codes, move this a bit away, go ahead, right click, and we're going to search for texture variation. Awesome. Now we just want to go ahead and plug the landscape codes into the UV, and then we want to take our shifted UVs and plug it into the landscape codes of our material functions. Now we can go ahead and save and apply that. And now if we go to our new map, it's way harder to see the textures repeat. Of course, there is a few noticeable unique repetitions, but it's kind of like it's not the same texture anymore, really. Now, of course, while this is great, it does add a bit of artifacting. I'm quickly gonna have to look for artifact to show you how it looks. Okay, now this took a really long while to actually search for this, but if we actually look here, it's kind of like the thing's confused at how it should rotate the textures. So there's just this line here in the middle where the texture doesn't really seamlessly connect. Now if you go to our landscape material and we actually go ahead, this is option, use Deverine. So we can go ahead and it's a boolean, so right click on the use diver, promote to parameter, use diver. Awesome. I'm just gonna go ahead and turn that on and then look how it looks. And now if we look in our map, there's kind of this weird Deverine that kind of masks it. Yeah, it's a bit obvious, but it is doing way better work than it just being off. And the reason why I'm not gonna, of course, focus on the Deverine is I'm gonna turn it off. I don't really want that for now, because We could actually do stuff which makes this way less obvious. So I don't want to waste a few instructions on differing when we could possibly get a better result. But this texture variation node's amazing, right? It really is shocking how good it works. What it does is it just takes UV, scrambles it around, and does rotations and everything to textures. Of course, it's recommended you plug a height map in of the object you're using, so a displacement map of the texture you're working with, so that it could accurately actually connect the edges. And the reason why we're not going to be doing this is we're only going to be using this one, so it's going to be working with a low-res blurred noise to set up the rotation and everything. Because we don't want to use multiple of this, the great thing about this texture variation node is you can only use this once, and while it is a pretty expensive instruction, considering... Actually, it's not really that expensive, but it is a bit costly. It's still better because it doesn't have any additional cost whatsoever when we actually work with multiple textures. So this means that you can add as many textures to this texture variation with the shifted UVs, and it won't cause any more instructions. So that's perfect for our case. So while this is really great on its own, there's of course other ways we can do texture variation and possibly hide this a bit better. So what we want to do is we want to go and open up the base layer. Now I'm gonna just say that I'm gonna be working in the base layer, but I want you to do everything we did in the base layer and just do it over in layer 1 and 2. The reason why I'm not gonna put that on screen is it's quite a lengthy process typing everything out, and we're just gonna be saving precious YouTube time. Yeah. Watch time retention, people. Anyway, we just want to go ahead and open the base layer. You want to go ahead and in each layer you want to copy the texture, every single of the 3 textures you're using. And then what you want to do is the first ones you had, you want to call them near. You want to put near at the end of them. So normal texture near. And then you want to do this for the roughness texture. Just go ahead and type near. And then, of course, these we're going to call far, because they're going to be the far scaling. Now, this doesn't really instill a lot of confidence in what we're actually doing, because I'm letting you do something which you're not really sure what we're doing. And the best way to describe this would be if we go ahead and scroll away, let's say about here. Now the mountain doesn't have any more detail. It looks flat. It looks like there isn't much detail, but if we go close up, there really is quite a lot of detail. And what we want to do is we actually want to go ahead and based on how far the player is from an object, it should scale the textures. So if we're further away, it should scale the textures bigger so that it has more of a perceived detail far away. And also it will reduce the tiling, but of course we kind of really broke the tiling in a very... Yeah, I'm still hyped about that texture variation node. I really am shocked. Anyway, so we just want to go ahead, and this base layer diffuse textures files you've created for each layer, we're just going to go ahead and take our landscape layer codes and do a multiply. We're going to copy that multiply again, and we're going to plug the landscape layer codes into each of these multiplies. The top one is going to be for the near UVs, and the bottom one is going to be for the far UVs. Now the reason why we're doing this is because we can save up on creating multiple landscape layer codes for different distances, and so we can just multiply landscape codes, then we don't have to call landscape codes again. So we save on the bit of instructions here, and what we can do now is you just want to go ahead, go to the top multiply, right click on the B. If you right click on any of the pins, you can actually promote it to a parameter. And now it's going to be called B. This is going to be our base layer near scale. Awesome. We're going to move this here. And then what you want to do is you want to go ahead and just drag off that B. Actually, wait. Just hover on the B, right click, promote to parameter, and this is going to be base layer far scale. Awesome. And we're just going to have to default these values to something. So for the near scale, we're going to go for 1.20. So it's going to be 0.2. And for the far scale, we're going to do 0.02. It's important to note that the smaller the number, the bigger the texture. Really weird concept, but yeah, that's how it works. Of course, we have a problem. And it's that we have these far textures, but we don't have a way to connect them to anything. And of course, that's what we're going to be fixing with a node. We're going to go to our main landscape material, right click, and search for distance blend. Distance underscore blend, that matters. Then you're going to get this node. If you double click and open this up, we can actually see the material function in action. What it does is just takes the pixel depth. Now, a gross simplification of what the pixel depth is really is just practically how far a pixel is from the camera. It's really a gross simplification, but that's practically what it is in a way. So yeah, pixel depth, how far a pixel is from the camera, so we can actually calculate how far the texture is from the camera. So we just want to go to our M-Landscape material. The blend range, we want to right click and promote to parameter. And you want to take the start offset, right click, promote to parameter. Now the start offset by default is -1000, so you just want to go change the default value to -1000. It's important to note the number should be in minus for start offset. It works in a negative number. What you want to do is for the blend range, we just want to go ahead. By default, it's 100. And yeah, this is a positive number. The start off should be negative. If you have it on default negative, it should kind of stop you from being aggressive with it in a way. Anyway, the result, we actually want to connect to our layers. So of course, I'm going to do the base layer, and I want you guys to do the other layers. It's the same concept for setting everything up. But what we want to do is right click and type in linear interpolate. Awesome. Now we're going to lerp between two textures based on how far it is. So we're going to lerp the texture based on how far it is by lerping a near texture, so a smaller texture, and a far texture. So we're going to take our diffuse near texture, plug that in A, and plug the far texture into B. Then you want to do that for the normal. We want to go ahead, create a new lerp, again another one for the other texture what we're working with. Of course, use multiple based on how many textures you have. A gonna be the near, B gonna be the far, and then we're gonna go ahead, plug in the green because green roughness, and plug in the far into B. And then we can go ahead, plug the diffuse in the base color, the normal in the normal. I'll just drag it up correctly and drag the ORDP texture, so the roughness part we extracted from it, to the roughness. Okay, now this is great and everything, but what's our alpha value gonna be if we're lerping in between stuff? Well, this is actually where our distance blend comes in here. It gives us a value from 0 to 1 based on how far the texture is. So we can actually take this result and plug it into our landscape layers, but we do have a problem where we don't actually have a place to input it, so we have to add a new function input. So we're going to go to our MF Landscape base layer, and right click in the open, call function input, and the input type is going to be, of course, a scalar because it's a 0 to 1 value. What we want to do is we're going to call the input name. It's going to be the blend, not balend, blend distance. Yeah, and we're just going to go ahead and press this up arrow to make it smaller. And we're just going to go ahead, plug this into the alpha. And this is going to be deciding how far a texture is from the camera, and thus scale our textures accordingly. Now, this setup we have here, where we have the near and the far scale, the multiplication, and all these lerps, and all these textures, you want to do this on each of the layers. Now, I'm not gonna show you how to do this because it's the same concept. Just copy these 3 textures, rename these 6 textures that you have now, and then we do the multiplication, and then we have the lerps, and yeah, then you just add a new input for our material function. And yeah, that's all. We have to do that for each layer. So of course I'm gonna skip me doing this, so it's just easier to digest. Okay, now I'm almost done with setting up all the material layers. It's important to note, you might make this mistake, where sometimes I copy over the scale parameter, and what would happen is you don't rename the layer to actually fit the layer on. So I copied from layer 1, and now I'm layer 2, I need to rename this. So if you have any problems, just make sure each is named correctly based on their layers. That really is important to note. You just want to go ahead, save, and apply, and that's everything set up. So if I go to my Landscape material, you're going to see all these layers have a distance blend input. And of course, now we can go ahead and plug in our distance blend. Now we can go ahead, plug all these in, and it's perfect. Now we can save. Okay, now that's done, we can go to our instance to make sure everything is fine. So how do we make sure everything's fine? Well, it's simple. We just want to make sure each of our layers have multiple textures. So they have 2 of each texture. Means we set that up. And then we want to make sure layer 1 far scale, near scale, far scale, near scale. And also for the base layer far near scale. Then we have the blind, the range, and the start offset. So everything's ready to go. We should see something like this. So yeah, wow, we made the landscape worse. Insert, why did you do this? Why did you make the landscape worse? Don't worry, we're gonna fix this. And it's to do with where we don't have a good distance value, so we have to be very close up for our texture to scale. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go to our instance. Now I want to drag out this window, because what's great about an instance is, of course, you can adjust this live without any problems, because, well, instance. So when we're in our new map, we just want to make sure that we adjust this blend range and the start offset. Now the start offset, we're going to start off with try and minus 5,000. Yeah, now that already looks a bit better, but we can see that further away isn't looking too good. Maybe we can try a minus 6,000. And also, it might be too harsh of a cut there, so we can see it literally cuts in. We can change the blend range to something a bit better, maybe like 500. Oh yeah, that really helps clear the line. Let's try 1,000. Yeah, that's really good. Now I can go ahead and dock this again. I would say a big problem is the amount of scaling applied. So maybe it's scaling a bit too big for our liking. So what we can do is we can of course go to our landscape instance and we can change the scaling up. So the for scale we might want to make a bit smaller. So let's try 0.05. 0.05, and of course our far scale for layer 2 0.05. Let's hit save and check how that looks. Okay, yeah, that looks pretty nice. Everything's looking clean. Let's see if we hit play how bad it is. Yeah, and of course it looks really good. Like, this rock has a lot of detail when you get closer. Of course, we can see the more detailed one. I can definitely see the problem is also that we have a really big scaled up texture close up. So what we want to do is we might want to adjust the scaling a bit for that as well. So we're gonna go ahead and the near scale, let's try 0.25, 0.25, and the layer near scale 0.25, not 0.025, 0.25. Let's see. Yeah, now we're talking. Now it's being scaled a bit better. Let's see. Yeah. Okay, might be a bit too big still, so let's play around. Oh wait, I can see why this is too big. I forgot something really important. Is that we actually messed around with the landscape chords when we were setting everything up. So once we reset the mapping scale to 0. And now if we go to our new map, yeah, now the scaling has really kicked in like VTech. So we just want to go ahead and change our scaling back to the values we had. I don't know why I forgot that we actually did that. You can of course just click the reset button on these. Because we gave them a default value, they actually have a reset. So that's really good. Now let's go to our new map, check now. Okay, close up, it's really good, but I still feel like the textures far away isn't scaled up enough, I would say. So let's go back to our landscape instance. And the far scale I would actually really like to improve. So 0.01 maybe is actually what we're gonna go for on each of the far scales. That should give us a pretty good result. Yeah, this is really looking nice so far. It's still not 100% there, but yeah, it's progressing. Let's take a look. Yeah, yeah, it's looking pretty good actually so far. I would say that it's a bit harsh. Still, like the distance maybe is a bit harsh. Like it's a bit further away. Of course, I could infinitely play around with this, right? I can play with this probably for the rest of my life. But you can adjust with these values as much as you want to dial it in. In a future episode, I'll talk more about which value I used. So if you want to stay around for that, yeah, that's totally fine. But I'm pretty happy with this result. The mountains further away has a bit more texture to it. And that looks pretty nice. If you get close up, then it adds even more. You might think this is a pretty glaring transition, but don't worry. Your object is gonna hide this pretty well. And quite a few games actually does this, so don't worry. This is kind of normal to do in the industry. Anyway, now we have that set up, we're gonna talk about discoloration. So, in real world, grass isn't the same color for entire patches. It has different patches in between, which is a bit colorated or discolored. And that's something we want to emulate. So, how are we gonna emulate this? Well, it's simple. We're gonna go to our M-Landscape in Terra, and we want to intercept this base color and adjust its value. So we're gonna move this base color away. What we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead and create a new texture sampler. Not sprite texture sample, we're gonna go ahead, texture sample, awesome. We're gonna create 3 of these in fact. What you wanna do is we just wanna make sure that all of these is sampler sword, sampler source is shared wrap, and then you wanna make sure this is shared wrap, and you want to make sure this is shared wrap, and awesome. Now we can go ahead and create a new landscape chord, landscape layer chords. What we want to do is we want to go ahead and add a multiply. We can go ahead and plug this in, and then of course we can do another one and another one, because we're going to use 3 different scales. And that's how we can cut down. We're only using 1 landscape layer chord. Just go ahead, UV, UV. And then what we want to do is we want to add add node in front of all of these. Why? Well, it's simple. This actually controls the brightness of the coloration in a way. So you can go ahead and do that. Now, let's set up this entire procedure. So we're going to go ahead, right click on the B, promote to parameter. This will be our macro texture 1. We're going to actually add micro texture scale 1. And then we're going to go ahead, create a new parameter. It's going to be, let's name this macro texture scale 2. And of course you just want to do that for free, so let's go ahead, plug that into B, and this is gonna be for free. Awesome. Now we have that set up. We want to go ahead, go to these add nodes, and then what we want to do is we want to go ahead, take this B, promote to a parameter. This is be our macro variation brightness 1. And of course we can go ahead, copy, paste, rename this to 2. Awesome. And then we can go ahead, copy this, rename this to 3. Awesome. Okay, let me just click this. Awesome. And we want to go ahead and multiply these bottom 2, and then we want to multiply these bottom 2 with the top one, so we can of course simplify this down to 1 pin. Now also, something we want to do is we actually don't want to use the RGB, we want to use the red, because we're actually going to be using a grayscale texture, and red actually gets the grayscale values out of it. So what we want to do is you want to click on all these texture samples, and texture, you want to look for a macro, T macro variation. Now if you don't have this, don't worry. What you want to do is you just want to go ahead and go to your content browser, click add, go to add feature or content pack, go to a content pack, and it will be in the start content. So if you have that ready to go, we can actually set this up. First one, it's going to be using T macro variation. Awesome. Of course, T macro underscore macro variation, and this one as well will be T macro variation. Awesome. Now that we have the setup, we want to set these scale values. Now for the first one, I usually like a 0.1. For the second one, I usually like a 0.02. And then for the third one, I usually like a 0.001. Of course, you can play around with these. I'm just going to take this landscape layer chords, move these. Yeah, just take these. Yeah, cool. And then you can also use a texture chord node. That would actually make sense if we use a texture coordinate. So you can actually give a unique V and UV tiling. But we don't really need that. We're gonna uniformly scale it, so it doesn't matter. Now, these multiplied values doesn't really mean anything yet, because we need to do something with this. And what this multipliers are doing is adding the result of all these textures together into one image. So we have to do something with this image, and this is where our wonderful lerp comes in again. So we want to take our linear interpolate, plug that into the A. And the B value is actually gonna be a color. So what we can do, you can just constant free, click that down. Awesome. And now when you click on that, someone make sure that it isn't a pure white. You want it in between white and black, somewhere in 0.60 range. So if all these are 0.6, you're in a pretty good range. And yeah. Then we just want to go ahead and multiply this with the base color. So we're going to take our base color, multiply. Awesome. And then our base color is going to multiply with our lip. Awesome. Now that everything is working here. Well, not working yet. We still need to do a few more stuff. The first thing is all the brightness. We have to go ahead, set the default value to 1 because we actually want these textures to show. Pretty important step to everything. And the multiply actually shouldn't be in our A, it should actually be in our alpha. I'm going to go ahead, disconnect that. And our A value should be this, and our B value should be a solid 1. Okay, that's perfect. Yeah, this should work. So let's test this out by saving and applying. Okay, and now if we go to our new map, you're actually gonna see, well, yeah. Now, if we actually go close up, you can see, yeah, there's lighter patches, there's darker patches, and there's just patches of everything, like not something, like nothing is a uniform color, right? And practically, what you can do is you can actually control the scaling values in the parameters. So let me just look for it. Yeah, this is the macro texture scaling and brightness. You can control everything here to change how the textures look, of course. But I'm pretty happy with this result. It gives pretty cool and nice looking results. Yeah. Okay, now we just want to quickly do one more thing to help with macro variation. But before I can do that, I need to actually download a few more textures quickly. So while I'm doing that, I'm quickly gonna cut the video and see you guys now. Okay, so I got a few textures from Megascans. The 3 I got was grass dried, lichen covered rock, and mossy grass. And that's kind of alt textures for each. So that means for the wild grass we have mossy grass as a secondary texture. For the eroded sedimentary rock we have the lichen covered rock, and for the forest floor we have the grass dried. It kind of looks super dirty. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be alternating between textures, so we have spots of these two textures colliding together. And how we're going to do this is we're just going to go ahead and just move stuff around. So I'm going to do this in the base layer. Of course you want to do this in each of the layers. I'm not going to show each of the layers because, well, it really is a lot of work to just show something that is done the same every single time. So I'm just gonna go ahead, move these down. We're moving this one down. And we're gonna take these 4, move these 1 down, and then just do this until we have last one. We're gonna leave a space open for each one. Yes, perfect. Now alt texture in between all these holes. So what we want to do is we're gonna copy the base layer diffuse texture near. And we're gonna rename this base layer diffuse. We can actually rename this base layer alt diffused texture near, but I'm gonna call it diffuse alt texture near. What you can do is if you can open your content browser, if you can't, don't worry. You just want to go ahead and save, close that window. Then I go to my new map, and what I want to do just want to go back to my material function, which was the base layer, and now I can open my content browser. I'm gonna go to my Megascans surfaces, and for the grass, for the dirt, we're doing grass dried. Just want to click on the diffuse texture. Now, if we click on this one and we scroll down, you'll see this circle with a left arrow. This is actually use, so it'll actually swap the textures out with the one you currently have selected in your content browser. Pretty handy thing. Gonna go ahead, copy the base layer diffuse texture file, and then of course we're gonna rename the diffuse to diffuse alt, and then of course click that button to swap it out. Okay, we can also go ahead, plug in the UVs for the near and the far. Awesome. Now we're ready to go. Now you just want to go ahead and click the normal texture. So we can do the same thing. I'm going to copy this base layer normal texture. And we're just going to go ahead and call it Alt. And then we can just, of course, use the use button. Actually, yeah, then select. If you just want to do that, okay, boom. Now that's selected. Now we can also go ahead here and duplicate this one. And now we can just do the use again. Awesome. And then we can hook up the UVs again. So the near in the near UV and then the far in the far UV. It's important to note that if you're having weird artifacting on lower graphic settings, it's because of the blending of the far texture. If you're having problems with that, you can just create a constant free vector, go to the coloring and set blue to 1. And this will instantly disable all the normals. And then you can just put that at the far blending. And that will stop all the artifacting you're getting on lower graphic settings. That's, of course, if you're struggling with that. Okay, now we're going to go ahead, copy the base layer ORDP texture. We're just going to go ahead and call this the Alt texture. And of course you want to go ahead and click and then click on that param. We accidentally named this one. You just want to copy and paste. And of course ODRP Alt texture. Awesome. And just want to click. Then we can go ahead and use the use button. Now it's switched. And then here we just want to go ahead, copy this, paste, and then we're also going to go ahead, just call this Alt texture, of course, again. And then you can click on this and do the use button again. And now you swapped out. Now we can plug it in the UVs so that the scaling is correct on everyone. Okay, perfect. And this is perfect. Okay. Wait, actually. Wait, let me just make sure. Yeah, everything's perfect. Okay, now we're gonna have to lerp the others as well. So we're gonna go ahead and copy these 3 lerps. And we're gonna have a lerp for the alt textures. So here and here. Awesome. And then we're gonna do the normals of the alt textures. Here and here. And then also I'm gonna have the ORDP, but we're using the green channel because that's the roughness map. Green and green. The alpha will be our input blend distance, so just want to go ahead and connect that to each one of these. Also, sorry, what you want to do is you want to go ahead and move these up a bit so we create space for blend distance node to go, so it's a bit more neat and tidy. Barely, but it's still a bit more neat and tidy, just a little bit. Okay, what we want to do is we just want to use lerps. Another one, linear interpolate. We just want to plug the standard dirt texture we're using, but we also want to plug the other lerp in of the new texture. So this is the new diffuse. And then we want to go ahead, copy, paste, and copy and paste. And then of course you just want to plug the normal of the old and the normal of the new one. And then of course the roughness of the new one at B, and this one was the old one. We just plug in here. Okay, now we can plug these in at the right places. This was the normal. This was the, oh no, this was the base color. This is the normal. And this is the roughness. Awesome. This is plugged together. But of course we're missing an alpha. Now this alpha, we're going to be solving very quickly. I'm just going to go ahead and go to my main landscape material. And what this alpha is going to be is actually going to be a texture that defines where we should make holes of new materials. So what we want to do is we actually want to take our landscape chords here, and you want to go ahead and multiply this with your landscape size. So if you don't know what your landscape size is, you just want to click on your landscape and check the resolution vert and make sure that you multiply with that value. And then we're going to go ahead, create a new texture sample. Okay. Awesome. Now the texture sample is going to be our Perlin noise. So if we actually go ahead and set your assets, we do T Perlin noise. Now Perlin noise will be in the starter content. Of course, you added the starter content for the macro texture. Awesome. And now that we have the red, now this red will be our alpha deciding factor. So how we're gonna handle this? We're just gonna go to our base layer. And we're gonna go ahead and this alpha we're gonna promote to a new input. So we're gonna make a new function input. It's gonna be actually gonna be I'm gonna say it's a texture, it's a scalar, because you're plugging the red in. Makes it a scalar. So plug in the alpha there, and the alpha there. Awesome. Now we can go ahead and name this our blend texture. Awesome. Save. Now it's going to say it needs a new input. We're just going to plug in our red blend texture. Now I'm going to test this by also doing these quickly with the landscape layer 1 and 2 off camera. Of course, it's the same way you do the others, so just do it over again. Okay, now that I've plugged these into each of our layer functions, we can go to the new map and wait for it to compile. Okay, and now it's done. We should see that there's a blend of different textures in between. Actually, no, something seems to be wrong. Okay, so the error is just a simple mistake on my part. This landscape code, of course, if you want to multiply 2017 by 0, of course it's not really going to work out. So here's another landscape code with a mapping scale of the landscape size. Remember, this needs to be your landscape size, and in my case my landscape size is 2017. If you really want to get spicy, you can actually plug the shifted UVs in here, and then you can scale this landscape chords, but it's not really necessary. In fact, it's just way easier just doing this. So you can go ahead and save this, and then we can actually have a final look. And honestly, this is really shocking, right? So close up, if I hit play, let's just actually look in game. So close up, we have a lot of detail. Further away, that mountain has a lot of detail. We have different types of grass patched around. And also, if we look at the mountain, there's multiple colors now, with the lichen rock mixed in. And it's looking really cool, honestly. Something I would say is a bit harsh or not really that great is if we go to our M landscape material. This coloring, I'd rather want to push this up. This is practically how low a darkness value your landscape will go. And honestly, now that I think about it, about 80% darkness level is pretty good actually, I think. Let's see. And yeah, so it adds a few dark patches, but it isn't too harsh. Remember when I said if you don't really like how the normal texture's working from far away, you can of course use a blue color, and I will fade away the normal texture. But honestly, I'm really shocked at how this looks, and of course it can look way better if you just mess around with this instance. If you go ahead and you mess around with this near far scaling, all that good stuff, I think you can achieve some pretty beautiful results. Of course, that's really up to you to experiment with these and find settings you like. And in the next video, I'm gonna show like a quick screenshot of what I found after the recording to look really good. Not next week, I mean next video. Next video we'll be talking about foliage, and we're gonna be talking about foliage based on landscape layers. So grass will contain grass, rock will have rocks on it, but I'll also, in what did I say in that accent? I'll also be going ahead and also publishing another video for foliage, but this time it will be about procedural workloads in Unreal Engine. So we'll talk about how to procedurally place grass and rock and everything based on the rules that we give it. So it's pretty cool. But until then, thanks for watching, guys. If you like the content, please subscribe. Hit like if you liked the video. Hit dislike if you didn't. And yeah, I mean, this like really isn't gonna show anything anymore, but I mean, still, please tell me what I can improve. I really love to improve my content as much as possible. Now that I have way more time for my content, and I can really just steamroll ahead, and I'm really enjoying my making my content way more. But anyway, good night, everybody.